Please enjoy this Monster Hunter World gameplay in the background. I forgot to mention that during this kind of recording, but thank you. Welcome back to another video of the campaign diaries, where I essentially just explain kind of like the thought process of what I do for my campaign and why, and just to kind of explain how I think and how similar DMs probably think. You know, we're bound to have the same idea, since a lot of people, love D&D and D&D in general, tropes and whatnot, and there's a lot of media out there to take from, and it's everyone takes something from something or someone. So but we're back again, and this time with session 1. So session 1 comes as we ended last videos with session 0, getting everyone's backstory, and things like that. So session 1, quite a bit happened, I would think, or I would imagine. But so first off, let me go on to say that before we even started, there was a question that I had for everyone, and it was just, what are your character's goals? So I made sure to have the character's goals as, just trying to get a feel for what they would want out of, the campaign, and what they're actually, what they want, and what they would like to see, etc. But yeah, essentially what their goals are. Long story short, the Tiefling Rogue, one of his obvious goals is to get something like a modified memory spell, essentially, but one that can erase his background, or erase his memory of being in like the blood war, from the Nine Hells, between the devils and the demons, and essentially he's a dude PTSD, and he has to take drugs, alcohol, and he wants a modified memory to wipe his the past life, essentially. The sorcerer drow is, I don't think they stated their goal. I think is just kind of, I think they're there just to hang around, and I'm totally fine with that as long as I know that in the beginning, and that's kind of why I asked the question. The paladin dragonborn was to obviously get back to their kingdom, or maybe kill the dragon, and so they were kind of thinking about that. The monk dwarf was to go to the Autumn Court and figure out what happened over at the Autumn Court, and what was kind of released underneath the tree spiraling thing. And I'm obviously forgetting someone, but I'm blanking right now. Excuse me while I try to remember all the characters that are there. The druid. The druid. God damn it! Someone just messaged me on Discord. So the druid gnome, his goal was to just get questions answered. He just wanted to know like what this world is. He's essentially kind of along for the ride as well, which I'm totally cool at. But I think like the further they get into the campaign, I'm hoping that the more invested they will be, and that's kind of my goal. And I didn't expect much, to be honest, because these guys are completely new to D&D and tropes, and essentially. So which honestly I'm really happy about, because that way I can actually explore a little bit and experiment on certain things that usually other players would be like, no, we just want like the good old-fashioned way, or something like that. Because since they don't know a lot about D&D or D&D tropes in general, I thought that was a good excuse, which is why the starting area I had a little bit trouble figuring out at first, because for most players, they want to start out in the village or a tavern or something like that, and to have a very very D&D-esque game, and not, or just a beginning. And obviously I opted as well to have them not know each other previously, just because I think it would be, given over time, they would obviously open up more, which by the time I'm recording this, the session 6 that we've gone through already, one of the players did ask about the other players, and even though their answers were pretty short, and they're still getting used to like role playing, a few of them were not going to do voices, and the other two are doing voices, so which I'm totally cool with too. I think that's fine and acceptable, and I think it's just you play however you're comfortable with. And I let them know, hey, I like to do voices, and they were totally fine with that too. So, so yeah, uh, it gave me a lot of freedom to try like a different idea for a starting area, and the starting area I came out with first was similar. I kind of wanted similar to a Dark Soulsy vibe. Because I'd mentioned that previously, where it was kind of like the Feywild mixed with like Dark Souls, and or just a touch, like not like completely mixed, but just a very small touch of it, like some Dark Souls influence, and some that dark fantasy, which I guess the Feywild kind of is already, but even more so. So I ended up deciding on them having to like wake up in like tombstones, and essentially kind of like wherever they were at or what their character would be at, divine intervention would have happened, and they were chosen essentially to be the saviors of the Feywild. So I already knew they were going to be like chosen ones, because I think that's kind of the easiest, one of the easiest tropes to kind of put in there, especially for like newer players. Like, you guys are like the saviors, and I think although it puts a lot of pressure on them to do well, I also think it's good for them to like, oh, so we actually have a goal, like we're the chosen ones. But they find that out a little later, but for right now, that's kind of like my thinking on why I wanted them to like start together but not know anything. And essentially I just made it where they appeared in some place in the spring court, in like a very safe area, like the beginning area, if you will. Very video gamey, but I enjoy that kind of part. But I also decided that I wanted to introduce the BBEG in the very beginning, because I always had a hard time like figuring out how to intertwine my big bads to the campaigns, and without them being annoying. And I thought like having a introduction just off the bat would be very cool, and would also be like, obviously if the players decided to fight him, I wasn't going to kill them. I was just going to render them unconscious. And that's because obviously they're the players, and they're the main characters of the campaign. So why would you kill your characters in the very first session? I never understood that. But essentially, they ended up waking up, in tombstones. They opened up the tombstones, similar to, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring, where you wake up in a tombstone and it travels somewhere. And I can't remember if Dark Souls 1 has one. I don't remember. It probably does, but I'm just forgetting it. It's been a long time since I played Dark Souls 1. But I know Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3 had it. Elden Ring has it. I didn't play enough Bloodborne to know if it has it. Actually, yeah, Dark Souls 1 does have it. I just remember now. So yeah, the Souls games, they have that. And essentially, they see the big bad kind of sitting right there. And essentially, he's just a human. He's essentially just a demigod dude. Your basic bad guy, except, he's crazy. He's actually like, mentally crazy. So he's like out of his mind. And so essentially, I was just going to have them be unconscious after like being introduced to the kind of bad guy of the session, or of the campaign. And he's just a fighter. He's just a fighter who's lived through 2,000 years of, war in the Feywild, and, kills every group of quote-unquote chosen ones. Which I've kind of, made a whole history about it, explained to my players about what would be it. I was kind of very open with some of the world stuff. Obviously, some of the stuff in campaign, you don't want to tell them everything, but, enough to where they understand, like, what this world is and what would it be. Now, he spares them, obviously, for a certain reason, but I have yet to think of, like, an actual reason why. Like, he's insane, so it could be any number of reasons, but in the end, I think I've decided that it's just because he just wanted a challenge. I'm not a lore writer or like a fiction writer. I don't make any stories like that. I'm very D&D is literally my only creative outlet. I don't draw, I don't write, I don't do anything else. I'm a very stereotypical non-creative dude. That's pretty much, I play a lot of video games. So, he's I was expecting my players to fight him, and he was going to make them choose their weapon, and he was just going to beat them with it, essentially, and just render them unconscious. They were going to wake up and, figure out things by themselves and decide where to go. Um, Again, experimenting with stuff that I have never used before. Somebody else probably has, but I have not. So, but oddly enough, they wanted to have they were like going for diplomacy, which I didn't expect. I thought they were just going to be, a lot of new players are very, blood lusted, crazed lunatics, but some players are not, and I didn't expect that. I honestly fully expected them to just go in and just be like, yeah, we fight this guy. And I think I may have given too many hints that this guy was like very strong, and so the gnome druid kind of the gnome druid, did I say gnome? The gnome druid wanted answers, and everyone else kind of didn't move and was like waiting for him to answer. And so, he made several points of why they should fight, and they just wanted answers on how they arrived to the Feywild, and why they were in this specific location. And essentially, there was like obelisks around each of the 5 tombstones, because that's how many players there were. And written on the on the obelisks were the names of previous heroes who were in the Feywild, quote unquote chosen ones, etc. So essentially, this is where I decided their first skill challenge would be. I didn't tell them that specifically because I was kind of in the moment and I didn't think it necessary. But essentially, I made him, he made several points about why they needed answers. And for each point, I kind of like, all right, give me a persuasion check. And then I was like, all right, give me another persuasion check. And I was like, okay, give me a third persuasion check. And after several persuasion checks, I had the BBEG give like an insight check, and I made him where he's just essentially an insane warrior, like a very kind of very Greek mythology kind of style, like maybe a Hercules type, except evil Hercules essentially. So his insight wasn't that high, and surprisingly, the gnome druid succeeded on each of their persuasion checks, and the way I kind of was able to help them kind of get out of it was, I think he made the point, and I'm trying to remember. It's been some time. It's been a few weeks since that session 1, but he made the point that they need to figure out what's going on, and I think someone had mentioned they need to get stronger, and I kind of rolled with that, where the BBEG was a crazed warrior, and he wanted the challenge, and if the gods were going to challenge him with quote unquote chosen ones, then why not take full advantage of it? He's been living for thousands of years without a challenge, and I had him just get up and walk away. Let me get my thoughts together. I'm kind of looking at my notes. I'm not good with kind of speaking as well either, so I always have a hard time. But yeah, so essentially, he left, and the last thing he said was like, someone's going to be coming for them. Now, this is where certain kind of things change here, because the way I meant that to be was like, oh, there's going to be an NPC that's going to be here. It's like him kind of knowing the situation. Like he's a crazed warrior, but he does have some like demigod powers, so he knows someone's looking for them, because prophecies and everything. I explained everything to them. So they took that, and I think one player had kind of interpreted that, me saying like, oh, someone's coming, as a evil entity, like something that's going to eat them or kill them. And so from that point, I essentially changed that. I changed that whole kind of way that the NPC was going to find this place and kind of lead them back to town. And I changed it as to, they're actually being hunted by a creature. And whenever I have like specific creatures that are like sent by a god or goddess or what have you, I usually go with like creatures that have like a good sense of tracking, and I always like to use a homebrew creature, kind of like the hunter or the beast. But one of the creatures that I always stuck with, no matter what, was a creature that was inspired by NADPOD. If you guys don't know NADPOD, it's a D&D podcast, but it's a very good one. And in campaign 1, they introduced these drow called the Hounds, who were like drow that were led by a blind drow who could sniff magic. And I always thought that was really cool, like a drow that could, or a creature that could essentially sniff magic. And this was when I was like super new to D&D. Like I didn't know anything about D&D and any of the monsters. So, but yeah, a drow who sniff magic. And obviously it was like a very funny campaign. And there was, it was a creature that could speak, but I kind of, added my own little, DM twist to it, or I guess not even twist, but my own little personal flavor. Everyone has their own flavors of creatures and monsters, and everyone kind of messes with them on their own. And obviously I do like my creatures and creatures that hunt to be more bestial than bestial and aggressive, longer ears to hear and a snout, and eventually I essentially just turned it into a Dragloth that hunts them. And a Dragloth is just like a drow that has like very bestial senses, and obviously so it's just a blind Dragloth that has very good perception and some other abilities that I added to it. But after they were kind of done with that encounter, he left, and so they kind of like were talking to each other and like, all right, where do we go now? One of them kind of climbed a tree, looked out about around the area, and opted to go. I described what they saw top of the tree, and I actually so I hadn't completely created this world yet. I was very much in the creative part, like just making up the story, or not story, making up the adventure for them, and trying to base a lot of the locations on what I just told them at the moment, because I hadn't completely made everything, and so I just kind of based it off of them, off what they said. And pretty much they just started to go off into the Spring Court Forest, and we ended it there. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of session 1. Not a lot happens, but again, a few key points. A lot of stuff that I didn't mean to have happen did happen, and some stuff was situated because like the way I think it's important to allow players to kind of control the world in that aspect, where sometimes if a players misinterpret your whatever you say, for example, like the NPC that was supposed to find them in this little area, this tombstone area, it's a little more fun to kind of affirm their guesses and have it like become something completely different. So instead of an NPC that was going to find them, it's now a blind Dragloth that's going to hunt them down at certain levels, which I'm going to be very upfront. It is very, I guess, video gamey, because I do love to play video games, and I do love video games in general, and just slashers or RPGs and stuff like that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with playing like that. Everyone has their own play style. Some people like it, some people hate it. But yeah, so I think it's fun to just kind of interpret things and kind of bend your world to your players, because without your players, you don't have a world. You just have a really poorly written fiction novel that just has some random characters. And like I said, I'm not a writer, so I'm not a good writer. I'm not a writer at all. So, but yeah. Anyways, I think that's it for session 1. I think I'm going to combine session 2 and 3 because not a lot happens there. Mostly just kind of exposition, me explaining the entirety of the world to them, and like how they're part of a prophecy, and yada yada yada, same old. But yeah, so anyways, I appreciate you guys listening, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you.